G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of Wineback Wednesday, and I'm now revisiting a tiny little project we did beginning of this vintage. We picked a little bit of fruit, some Pedro Jimenez fruit out of the vineyard block, and if you cast your mind back, if you have watched the video earlier this year, the Cabernet on this block, which is about 73 years old now, is newer clones of Cabernet grafted onto Cabernet rootstock, except for one little block we found out by accident, a little 1,000 vine block we call it, because 1,000 vines is a little irrigation block just out here on the northern side of the winery, and it is actually, by accident we found out there was actually rootstocks of Pedro Jimenez, because over the years the machine harvester had gone through and some of the older wood gets broken, and then the rootstock actually reshot. And then one year, a few years ago, we started seeing little white berries in the bins of fruit as we were picking that section of Cabernet. So having a section of sort of dark, sort of bluey, purpley colour fruit of the Cabernet, and then there's these spots that looks like it had freckles in it of white, and we eventually found there's about 14 vines out there. So the last 2 years we've picked it separately, and this year I think we've got about 32 kilos. And I pressed it, fermented it. It's now been fortified. I had a Spanish grandmother, and when she moved to Australia when I was very, very young, she often had sherry in the fridge, typically a Fino. And and my mother and my father and myself have really enjoyed Fino sherry over the years. And so even though Fino is made from Palomino, which is another variety, Pedro Jimenez typically is made into a more richer, fuller style and sweeter style of sherry, or fortified. But that's probably the next best thing that I could use to make this Fino. So we haven't got any Palomino planted here, unfortunately. But I thought, so it has now fermented, obviously, of quite a number of weeks ago, and it's been fortified. The next stage is to try and get a floor, F-L-O-R, a floor culture, which we can then inoculate, and it sits on the top. Unfortunately, you can't really see from there. I think we can see vaguely through here, but it is just settled wine. Get the floor in there, the F-L-O-R. It's a yeast culture that sits on top and segregates the wine from the air per se, but starts imparting this lovely, if you've ever tasted Fino sherry, it's got this lovely nuttiness about it, but it's this vibrant, fresh wine style. So at the moment it's been gassed, it's got a water trap up there, so the oxygen ingress is negligible, but let's give it a go and taste it, see where we're heading. So there are a couple of wineries in the Barossa, which I have contacted, and they are happy to give up a little bit of floor culture. So often the way they do it, you actually get a tissue and you wipe it, or you on top of the culture, and then you can sort of transfer it into another vessel as such. Let's see how my siphoning techniques work. I won't take too much. But if you looked in here, I mean, I think the colour of the bench is probably influencing the colour of there, and it looks a bit sort of golden, but when you look at it here, I will gas it again after I finish this video. But looking at that very pale straw and vibrant, and it's sitting on yeast leaves still. Looking at it, it's just lovely. I mean, it's relatively neutral. I think that's what happens with Palomino as well, is that the floor gives that nutty character and vibrancy, and you get this sort of minerality and this oyster shell notes and this nuttiness from that yeast culture that sits there and just imparts characters as this. It's sort of a living organism as such, but I think that's probably dead cells there as well, and there's a bit of autolysis and all sorts happening going on. So it's a really unique ecosystem, if you want to call it that, environment, and such a unique style of wine. But there are some There are some little bits of nuttiness. I think it's probably, and a little bit of creaminess, but it's obviously sitting on the yeast here after fermentation. There are some overall it is quite neutral. There are some sort of citrus notes, but it's more that heading towards what I would think of that Fino sort of style, sort of. Then on the palate, reasonably neutral again. There are some citrus notes, lovely acidity. It's been fortified to about 14.5%, 15% alcohol, so not too high. So there's no sort of warmth as such. There's a little bit of, I suppose, touch of sweetness, sort of roundness to the palate, which obviously alcohol has a inherent level of sweetness to it, just the way it is. It's really quite long and vibrant, but I think we really need to get that floor in there and get the culture growing across the top, and obviously over time it will start imparting characters and give us that lovely result we're looking for. So thanks for listening. I thought I'd give it a go. It's been sitting here on the bench. I sort of moved it around the winery a few times, but I haven't looked at it since I fortified it. Since after I fortified it. I looked at it after I fortified it, but since then, it's been a number of weeks now that I haven't looked at it. But I think it's time to get the floor into it and then get the next stage of the process ongoing. So thanks for listening. Speak to you soon.